All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Geopolitics and Money, formerly known as Geopolitics in Conflict. We're very excited to be with you as always. And we do have an interesting topic we're going to be addressing today. So,
Yes.
how are you?
So I'm good. This is a little bit of a new setup. We're trying something different.
Yeah.
It'll probably migrate over time, but we're trying something different right now. So
Yeah.
just to let you guys know. But I'm pretty good.
Yeah,
How are
that's.
you doing?
I'll admit I'm not doing any contribution to this because production ain't my thing. So.
Also, can you guys hear David? Okay, I don't want the microphone too far from his.
Yeah,
I know David is very
no.
loud.
I've been told I have a loud voice through a comment. If I can tone it down a little bit, and I was like, why don't you just reduce the volume? Yeah, that's all. Anyway, so excited to be with you guys. We got an interesting topic, as I mentioned. We're gonna be talking about it, and we're gonna tie it also to what's going on right now. So, what are we gonna be talking about?
Okay, so this is kind of a game-changing topic, and I'm a little bit shocked that there isn't more coverage about it. So I have a couple of reasons for that. The topic is basically that China has used the digital renminbi, the digital yuan, in cross-border transactions to the tune of about $1.2 trillion so far. So that's an interesting claim, and we've been able to substantiate it to a certain degree. I don't know if this particular set of information that we're about to give you, I have not fully been able to substantiate it. However, it is happening. And that very much is substantiated. Over the last year to 2 years, there have been an enormous amount of test transactions that have occurred in the digital yuan in cross-border transactions, all throughout the ASEAN nations and all throughout the Middle East. So we're looking at energy transactions very specifically, and that's very important. And the most critical piece of information here is that it's a much better deal than the SWIFT system in a couple of really key ways.
Yeah, and that is what. Well, I'll provide you guys a link. You can look it up because I got a feed through my LinkedIn feed, rather. That's when I read the article about it as well. But the importance of it is to understand how something like this will have a link into what's going on right now, especially with what just happened in Washington, which I am sure you are aware of, knowing what Mr. Trump just did. So, and we'll get into that as we move forward. First, please make sure to type in the chat box where you are joining us from. We'll greatly appreciate it because we always like to know what that is. So the idea is when we think about this, like what Elizabeth mentioned about the bypassing the SWIFT, because that is the fundamental issue with this. And the issue, when I say issue, I'm referring to us, not the Chinese, because it won't be an issue to the Chinese. It won't be an issue to any other country that decides to embark on this. Now, when you consider what's going on in the global economy right now, the pushback, and I read the statements from one in Europe by what's her name, the liar Ursula von der Leyen. We don't agree with it, whatever, but I still have to listen to what they have to say. And when I listened to the statement she released, she did a conference or a press release on it, and it was like a very measured wording as far as how much they're going to be pushing back against the U.S. I heard also the Carney from Canada, what he's saying about pushing back. And I also found out that the Chinese will not hold back in hitting back the U.S. with this innovative tariff. So when you take all that into consideration as to what the Chinese regarding this bypassing the SWIFT, it makes perfect sense.
Okay, so this conversation revolves a little bit around central bank digital currencies, though, and I think that it would be remiss to sort of not talk about central bank digital currencies because this has, according to what we were able to find, this has garnered the attention, I think, of 27 central banks. It was the information was released at Davos, I think it was last year,
Yeah.
that almost every central bank globally is looking to do a central bank digital currency. So that's something that is very popular. It's something I particularly think is a bad idea,
Yeah.
but it is something that's very popular. But the deal with this particular central bank digital currency, the digital yuan, is we're looking at the cross-border transactions in two ways. SWIFT, number one, is actually not SWIFT. SWIFT is very slow.
Yeah.
SWIFT takes 3 to 5 days to create to fully accept a business
A transaction.
a financial transaction. So it's very slow. It also is very costly. So I don't know if you guys have ever considered what the percentage the payment processor actually takes
Yeah.
for a transaction.
Mhm.
So it's much cheaper to do. It's so let me throw some figures in here. So let's do the pilot project between Hong Kong and Abu Dhabi. Saw a payment settled in 7 seconds with
Wow.
fees that they said dropped by 98%.
Wow.
Yeah, that's really substantial, and that is sort of the killer in this in this whole situation.
Yeah.
Is you now have speed and you now have
Less
very heavily reduced costs.
cost, yeah, which make more sense, because when you consider, I recall one time someone asked for some assistance, financial, whatever, and I was just looking at the options when I found out the fees that cost to do that transaction overseas. I was like, I reached out to the person. I was like, listen, it's gonna cost you so much just in the fees by the time all this. I said, it's not worth it. So, and of course, that makes more sense now. Why? I think I'm looking at the big picture in all this. And the big picture has to do also where BRICS is headed regarding this. And we'll get into this. First, let me share one particular, as I said, I'm going to put the link for you guys. You guys can read it later on. I'm going to put it in the chat box. This way you have a second eye on the... And here is what the article says. It was written by Ravi, and it was written on March 22nd. And I found it very, very interesting. Here's what it says, and I quote, "In less than a decade, China has gone from testing its digital renminbi in pilot cities to integrating it into the arteries of global trade. Through a combination of bilateral currency swaps, smart contracts, and infrastructure diplomacy, Beijing is now rolling out a digital Silk Road that's not only bypassed the US-led SWIFT system, but rendering it increasingly irrelevant. As of 2024, 53% of China's gross border payments were settled in renminbi, up from 40% just 3 years prior to 2024.
Okay, something you just said is really
So,
important.
yeah.
Like, so important. So China's Silk Road, right? Initiative.
Yeah.
The Belt and Road
The
Initiative.
BRI. Yeah.
Sorry. I mean, it's...
Well, the Silk was the older, yeah, which is, yeah.
But they're calling it a digital Silk Road. So it's the digital payments are actually woven into infrastructure.
Yeah.
Through the BRI, the Belt and Road Initiative. That's so smart. That's
cool, because you're gonna have the whole global South into this.
That's the whole point. Is through these payments, through the ASEAN nations, through there's a map over here, so print it. But through all of that, they have the vast majority of the planet. Who they don't have is the United States, which is unquestionably the largest market. However, the Americans don't exactly love paying transaction fees either, and they don't exactly love things being late either. So I think that is what they've created is a very interesting, is a very enticing thing forward. I would also like to speak to the BRICS. So there's a BRICS payment processor that is also that is
Yeah.
also in the works.
Yeah.
BRICS Pay.
Before you jump into
Okay,
this,
yeah.
I have one last sentence to add to what I just mentioned, because it's
Yes.
very, very crucial. And feel free to comment on it if you like. It is what part of that statement says, and I didn't get a chance to read it earlier, but
Oh, yeah.
it says this: this isn't de-dollarization, it's monetary decoupling by design. End of quote. I mean, it's becoming very, very clear as to where things are headed. Of course, now with what Mr. Trump is doing regarding all the tariffs that, I don't know if you saw the list. It was like,
my sound is apparently bad. Let me see if I can fix it.
okay.
All right, David, keep.
Okay, so this is what I'm seeing. This trend, it's gonna now there are those who are saying, well, wait a minute, this could be a good opportunity for investments through these tariffs. Yeah, that's what I've heard. I'm not a financial advisor, but
How about now, guys? Oh,
is
it's
it
done.
good?
No, it's dead entirely.
Here, use mine. I have a
No,
loud
it's okay.
voice.
Let me see if I can fix this.
So this is when I see the challenge that the U.S. is going to be facing.
Hello.
Because now you have most of the global south deciding, why should we be tied to the dollar? Yeah, mind you, the dollar's still strong. Dollar's not going to go away anytime soon. Let's just be honest about this one. But the idea of now what the Chinese are doing, and when you think about where the rest of the global south wants to move, it becomes clear where things are headed. That's just the way I see it. And to me, as a consumer, I rather have a platform, if I may use the term, where I can do transactions with that are less costly. So,
Okay, guys, am I back? Can you guys hear me now? Because I just switched out some microphones, so let's see.
Is it working?
I don't know. We're about to find out.
No, they'll
All right,
they'll
guys,
give it thumbs up.
is it
Let's see.
working?
Let's see. Just guys, give a thumbs up if you can
Yeah,
hear
if
Elizabeth.
you guys can hear me, please give me a thumbs up.
Let's see. So,
Nope, still the same. Okay,
Still the same.
lovely.
still bad sound. Okay.
Sorry,
Just-
guys.
Just use this one here. You guys can hear me, right?
Yeah, that's so weird. No, it's showing that they can also. It's still not working.
On both of us.
No, it's working for you.
So,
Oh no, that's really frustrating.
yep.
Input, output.
Those who.
Try that.
Okay.
Can you hear?
No sound. Hong Wang saying no sound. Francis Tango saying no sound. Truth Seeker, no sound.
Is there sound now?
Uh,
Say something?
yeah, Truth Seeker is doing thumbs up.
Okay.
Prof is back.
Am I
So-
back?
Yeah, sound is now. Okay, it's working.
Good now. Okay.
Okay.
Keep on going.
Yeah, let's just move on. And if it is, just use this mic here and we'll be fine. So, all right, that is what I was gonna just to go back to that point. When you think about now, if the Chinese, it's not if, as the Chinese move forward with this, because here's the thing, given what Mr. Trump just announced yesterday regarding these tariffs and all that, China ain't gonna hold back. So, of course, you have to put this in perspective of what's going on in that part of the world, meaning South China Sea, Philippines, Japan, Australia. You all know, and Taiwan, of course, you all know what's going on. But you put the economic aspect into linking it with the geopolitical tensions that's going on, and it makes perfect sense why something like this regarding the financial aspect.
Yeah.
Because to cripple, and I'm using my word carefully here, to cripple the American economic system is if you can get to the financial aspects, that is where the challenge is.
Is there no sound again, guys? Because some people are saying yes, there's sound. Oh my God. B. Coleman, did I know you from Samba? Are you Benny? Just sorry, I saw that in the chat. I just wanted to ask if that's who you are. Okay, we hear you both. Okay.
Taiwan still is giving us thumbs
Great,
up. That
fantastic.
means it's good.
Oh, technology, guys. So sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, everything is okay. Everything is okay.
So anyway, that's what I was saying, is the idea that now what we're going to be looking at now, the way I look at it is I'm going to be looking now what the Europeans going to do, what the Canadians going to do. The global south, we all know which direction is going. But on the other hand, remember, it was Russia that launched this push against this SWIFT, given the sanctions.
Absolutely.
It works perfect now between the Chinese and the Russians.
Well, and so that was ultimately the thing. Okay, everybody can hear us now.
Perfect.
This is very exciting. That was ultimately the issue with the sanctions, and that was something that was wildly short-sighted when it happened. And David, you predicted this. You predicted when the Ukraine conflict started that the U.S. sanctions on Russia actually pushed the situation too far. It pushed the world over an edge that it could not come back from. So weaponizing sanctions or weaponizing money is such a fantastically bad problem. It's like such a bad idea, but that's what they did. And so now you really are seeing the massive amount of alternatives coming up to the SWIFT system, to everyone basically using the US dollar. So now we're looking at cross-border transactions in original currencies. So there is somebody asked about rupees and all of that. I mean, there is some of that too, right? But we are looking at this digital yuan being extremely fast.
And also favorable.
It's favorable, but
among some countries.
So it's not necessarily a good thing.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily a good thing that we have central bank digital currencies. In fact, I actually think a central bank digital currency is a bad deal. I actually think that's a really awful thing for
the
world.
Idea of controlling.
Yeah, because the central bank digital currency. So right now, 1 in 8 people, I'm going to actually share this.
But at the same time, didn't you think of it this way? That it could be just used for the transactions on trades and all that, not a personal finance?
Right, but it's not going to be, and it isn't already. So the Chinese digital yuan, let me share this screen, they started this pilot project, I think, in 2009. So this has been going on for a really long time. All right, I'm going to share this tab right here. So 1 in 8 Chinese people have a digital renminbi wallet.
Okay.
So there are a couple of fundamental issues in terms of it being widespread throughout the entire population, but 1 in 8 people is not a small amount, right? It's not nothing. And it is growing, and they are looking at using it for salaries. And if they use it for taxes, that is the most surefire way to get it used by a massive amount of people, right? So using it for taxes and using it for salaries. So that's something that's being piloted, but or being used right now, but it's not going to stay as a cross-border. It's not going to stay as cross-border transactions only, because you have to be able to spend that money. It's only useful if you can spend it on something. And so the more it is spendable, the more it will be adoptable. That's actually what makes US dollars so valuable, is that they're spendable everywhere. Every country in the world, regardless of the decline, every country in the world still wants US dollars. That's what made them so valuable as a reserve currency. Right now, that's less and less the dollar is less and less attractive in that way. Number one, because of sanctions. So sanctions you could be the country persona non grata du jour, and all of a sudden you're going to get sanctions, and you can no longer trade freely with the United States, and you no longer have access to your money through the SWIFT system, for example, which is exactly what happened to Russia. So what my issue with central bank digital currencies really flat out are the control that comes with them. And I know that right now it's only 1 in 8 people in China, for example, but a digital currency isn't a CBDC isn't an actual currency. It's a credit. You give this person a credit and you can dictate how that credit is used. And that's my big issue with it, is it is very dictatable.
But that's why I really liked that article. The link I sent you guys, this is for you to be well informed. If you get a chance to read it later on, please do so. Like I always say, remember, creative mind. That's how you acquire more knowledge. So, and I read the article and I found it very, very insightful. And here is why. You think about when the author brought up these good points, and those are good points, and you give credit to the author. That's what's his name? Ravi VS. For example, he brought up the point that when you think about the war, is not about weapons anymore now.
Absolutely.
It's about finance.
Which is what I've been saying about China, guys.
Exactly. It's the idea. What I've been saying. And now for where the Chinese are headed with this transition away from the SWIFT makes perfect sense. And in the case of China, the advantage it has is that it's backing that up with a strong economic data, which is strong economy, basically. That's one. And second is the geography. When I say geography, I'm not referring just to China. I am referring to the entire global South.
Yes.
ASEAN, RCEP, Africa, Asia, West Asia, even Latin America. You heard what happened 2 days ago about Panama. About Panama.
I was like, things have been going wild, David.
BlackRock wanted to buy, and China refused. 23 billion purchase of some assets with the Panama, and China said no. Smart move.
Absolutely.
This is where you think in terms of what the Chinese, and that's why I couldn't agree more with the author mentioning that the war is not about weapon, is about the finance.
By the way, that's what I've been saying about China this entire time, is it's not good or bad, but China is waging a war in a very different way. I do think that the way China is waging war is a better way than the way the United States wages war.
I think the challenge with yours, probably to some who are listening, might not come across to them as the idea that this is for a good outcome, a good intentions, not a bad intentions in terms of controlling other countries.
For sure. I mean,
that's
war
where the difference
is bad no matter what. Like you're not gonna have a moral justification for war really ever. Right?
No, for sure.
And so like for sure there is no good way to really spin that. I know that the mass media manipulation says, well, those people aren't human, or those people are attacking you, or whatever. But fundamentally, people don't want to go to war. It's governments that want to go to war. It's people who have active interests want to go to war. A general population doesn't want to go to war unless they're manipulated to do so. At least what China is doing has the potential to be good. What I don't know going forward is, because even a digital currency, right? Like let's say a digital renminbi or a Fed coin or the euro central the central bank digital euro, right? All central banks, or almost all central banks, are trying to start these up. So hypothetically, there's some good to that. So having a cross-border transaction that happens in 7 seconds that saves you 98% of your cost, or 75% of the cost is in some of the cases with the Middle East, that's on the surface, that's actually phenomenal. On the surface, that helps business move faster. That helps freedom of movement. That helps faster manufacturing. overall, that's a good thing. It's just the ability for it to be misused is so severe that it is definitely a weighing of pros and cons. Do you ultimately trust the people and the central banks who are in charge of this, right?
Yeah, and that's exactly the problem we have here in our country. But again, for us, we've been on this since the Bretton Woods system, following World War II, and that was the decision. Here is where the difference that I see, the intentions when this was launched back then, making the US dollar the key reserve currency for the world and all that stuff. There was already the bad intentions from the get-go.
For sure.
That is where the problem.
It was set up, and I would really like the author for Creature from Jekyll Island. I would love that author on. He's in his 90s, I think, but he's still. I saw him on somebody else's show, so I'd really love to have him. Really brilliant guy. But I wanted to share also. So we'll talk about. I want to talk about the digital BRICS pay.
Yeah.
But I wanted to share a couple of pilots.
Before you do that, can I talk about something?
Yeah,
here?
Go ahead.
The reason I want to mention this one here, once again, as I said, I read the article. I was very careful about the wording of it, and it makes perfect sense. Here is one sentence that I want you guys to just take a step back and think about it. Here is what it says, and I quote, "The West is still viewing CBDC as a monetary policy tool. China, however, sees the digital renminbi as a multi-layer geopolitical instruments."
Absolutely. I absolutely agree with that.
And this is where you start to have to think in terms of how the rest of the world, at least the ones that want to escape the shackles of the US dominance, hegemony, financial control, how are they going to see this? And that's where I see the positive outcome going this direction, at least where China is headed. Yes, that notion of how this is going to be in the next 15, 20 years, we don't know yet. But again, knowing what I know, even though on a limited basis about the history of China, it doesn't strike me as they're going to be intending on controlling the rest of the world.
Well, but
that is where I am not convinced about that.
You have to separate a country from its central banks.
Well, not in this case or in China. It's not going to be like ours. Ours, the central bank, ours for the Federal Reserve. Federal Reserve doesn't respond to the U.S. government.
Yeah, no joke.
Yeah,
but then they were sold that they would.
Yeah,
like that's how the American people were sold.
However, if we are to think of the setup in China, it will be different because everything falls under the central committee, right? It's not going to be central
for now.
I still don't see. Okay. I see your point. I see your point. It's just I don't see that outcome will lead to that. This is what I'm convinced about. Is the idea. Again, I fall back into the history of China. Like you always. Well, you're the one who said this one time.
Absolutely.
The present teaches the past reflects on the present and the future and so forth. And you look at the history of China back then, you see, have they ever had the intentions of conquering the world one way or another? And we don't find any evidence whatsoever.
But what I'm saying is they are economically already doing that. You can argue that it's for the good of all.
Yeah.
I'm not going to argue that it is or isn't for the good of everybody. Okay.
Yeah.
But they are already doing it. And yes, right now, the People's Bank of China, which is who is doing all of these pilots, whatever,
the main one,
it is owned by the government. And the digital yuan is backed by the government.
Okay.
So absolutely, I do agree with that. And that is their central bank. That's the only central bank they have. Okay. However, they are one central bank among many, and central banks have even if it is part of the government, central banks tend to have their own ways of doing things, and they are all working together.
Which is not the case in our system. Because the Federal Reserve is not part of the government.
No, I know that. I understand
that. That is my point. That is where the difference is. That's where I see the difference.
Right. And I do agree with that. I mean, that is unquestionably true. The Federal Reserve is literally not part of our government. Okay.
Or even you think about the ECB, the European Central Bank.
Yes.
Think about that one.
Absolutely.
So, what's her name? Christine Lagarde.
Yeah.
Yeah. You think about other European countries agree to what she's saying? No, they don't, but they have no say because
I
there
still
is that
have-
one that
yeah.
controls. That is my point again. When you compare the setup, the system in China in comparison to ours or the EU for that matter, I can see more problems with ours. I can see more problems with the Europeans.
For sure.
I don't see as much problems will be with the Chinese
We don't,
approach.
but like I said, the Federal Reserve, apparently, according to Bill Still's documentary, which was a phenomenal documentary, Money Masters, he talked about the fact that central bank has been kicked out of, the big bankers have been kicked out of the United States 7 times
That's
before
correct.
they finally ended up taking hold, right?
Yeah.
So there are times in US history where we have not had a Federal Reserve and our money has actually been government controlled. And what he puts forth, and I think is probably true, is that during the times where that's been the case, the economy has actually thrived for the most part. The economy has actually been able to self-regulate without having a big bank on top of it. So I do appreciate that China's one central bank, the People's Bank of China, I do appreciate that they are part of the government. And what I'm saying is China is being absolutely brilliant financially. Like, I am not knocking what they are doing here at all. For them, they are doing a brilliant thing. Getting people, because people have been tired of SWIFT for a long time. SWIFT is not a swift system. It's actually a slow, terrible, stupid
blood-sucking system. That is,
system. And it has not been upgraded. And so the big criticism is that, well, because Donald Trump said, oh, no central bank digital currency, that we're not going to be able to upgrade. But that's not true. There are other ways to upgrade a payment system that the United States isn't doing. But I believe the United States isn't doing it because there are other payment platforms that are probably lobbying, right? So we have PayPal in other countries. They have other platforms that they use. And so the average person can't actually tell the difference between PayPal and, let's say, what's happening here with the digital yuan, right? The average person doesn't know the difference between those two things. And so there are ways in which the United States has not kept competitive because I guess the governments were just resting on, okay, well, everybody needs SWIFT, so it can be as inefficient and terrible as possible. But we have not kept current. The United States has not kept current with actually the global financial system.
Well, this is why I did the interesting point to understand in all this is that with going forward with this thinking of what China is doing, the $1.2 trillion and so forth, this is not about sort of replacing the dollar. No. It's making the dollar in these aspects irrelevant. Irrelevant to whom? Irrelevant to Chinese trade with other countries. That is where, like I said, the dollar will always be there. That ain't gonna go overnight. It's gonna take a while for it to happen. It's just when you start to have so many countries around the world preferring an alternative to the dollar. This is to me what I see.
Why would you not? If it costs so much less to do, if it's so much faster, why would you not?
Don't be surprised, because if I give you the example of BRICS and how, for example, when the conversation started about creating that currency for the BRICS, India objected to that automatically.
Well, of course they did.
You're still gonna have some countries, and I don't shy away from saying this. You all know where I stand on this one regarding India in BRICS and regarding Philippines in ASEAN. 2 weak links in the 2 separate economic blocks. So the idea will always be that point of, if BRICS is going to move forward that way, if ASEAN is going to move forward that way, we're going to have to think in terms of, will it be any hurdles that's going to prevent the implementation of these particular policies, financial one that is?
It doesn't look like it. So what I want to share, I'm sharing this right now on the screen with you guys, if you can see it. So this is Singapore and China to pilot cross-border digital yuan use for tourism spending. That's super interesting.
That's a good idea.
Tourism. I want to share this one with you guys too. If it switches over, China explores cross-border uses for digital yuan in new trial. So this was October of last year, so not very long ago. So it's talking about the Saudi Arabia and other partners, and then also Hong Kong, Thailand, and the UAE. the IMF and other organizations also were paying attention to this.
It was nothing about Malaysia and Indonesia regarding
no,
this?
those are in other articles though.
Well, the reason I'm mentioning this, because you think about, for example, for Malaysia and Indonesia, at least the what I know so far, moving forward from the economic aspects, those two countries, at least to my knowledge, they are moving up the ladder economically speaking. This is something that some have argued why Philippines is not paying attention to, given some other countries in ASEAN have moved up economically because of their links to the Chinese. And the way, economically speaking, the way you look at it is what I'm thinking about when you mentioned Saudi Arabia. The first thing that came to mind, you know what it is a sovereign wealth. You know, that I found it very interesting, because here's the thing. In Malaysia, there is now some push for the sovereign wealth as far as where they want to move forward. But the reason I'm bringing this up, because you have to think about when that meeting between the US and Russia took place in Saudi Arabia. Who else attended the meeting? He was the head of the sovereign wealth fund that attended that meeting. Why will a head of sovereign wealth fund will be attending a meeting that deals with a very complex geopolitical issue, which is the Russia-Ukraine conflict?
Well, because you can't separate
exactly
them.
That's one. But also you have to think in terms of, because of what Russia already pushed towards bypassing the SWIFT, you get now the Saudis pushing. As a matter of fact, Saudis have we're asking for foreign investments. If I am, please don't quote me on this because I couldn't remember exactly, about $21 billion of sort. This is part of the sovereign wealth fund, because the Saudis also are thinking in terms of where this is headed. That's why they went ahead. You remember last year, they went ahead and made the agreement with the Chinese to transact in the Chinese yuan.
Absolutely.
It's because of that reason. I think they're seeing something coming. That is why they had the guy of the sovereign wealth attending the meeting. That, to me, I was like puzzling first when I saw that.
Well, the Saudis are, and this is obviously in my opinion, and this is just financial. The Saudis are playing both sides in that way, but it's in their best interest to do so. I'm not hating on that. That's not
no.
That's a very reasonable thing for them to do, considering what's happening. But apparently 87% of nations in the entire world are compatible with this digital yuan, with the digital renminbi. And
so that makes it now a fait accompli regarding joining China, which will be, this is what Peng Yu is saying. By the way, thank you so much, Peng Yu, for your super sticker. Peng Yu is an avid supporter of the channel.
Thank
also.
You so much.
Here is what it's saying. And I couldn't agree more, because that was exactly what I was thinking. China may be conquering the world. It is not by force. Other countries may join by choice. Spot on, because that goes back to your point. That goes back to your point. Why other countries will be looking.
Right. Because China is giving the better alternative. And this has nothing to do with, I mean, the United States obviously, unquestionably, is still the largest market. Okay. That is for sure true. But with lack of innovation, and that's something that I'm not necessarily seeing the Trump administration do. The Trump administration is doing a whole bunch of other things, but some innovation in the financial tech world would probably be fantastic. That would probably be a really great boost for the United States if we actually had payment systems, for example, that were cheaper, because, oh my gosh, they're so stupid expensive. People don't want 2 to 3% skimmed off the top of every single transaction. Like, that's crazy. And it's a crazy amount. And it really, I mean, I know they have to run their businesses or whatever, but that has to be some kind of cash cow. Like, that's an unbelievable amount of money.
Well, I looked at it when I was in China. You know, I tracked all my expenses. Because remember, it was the community that funded that trip. So for me, as part of that responsibility, I had to track, and I saved every little transaction. And you know what I found? And I saved everything. I have the receipts at home for all that. I found out that for every transaction, because I used the what you call it, the the Chinese system where you pay
Yeah,
with
yeah.
phone, whatever.
Yeah.
But for everyone, because of the SWIFT aspect, it was fees for every.
I know.
I
get
paid
fees
for thing
too,
as
yeah.
low as $2, the equivalency of
Yeah.
$2. You know, there was a fee for 23 cents here, 25 cents here.
Absolutely.
It amounts to about $923 total. And to me, it was like, you know, this is where that SWIFT system is. And I was just floored at the idea that it will cost this much for a simple transactions. You know, I wasn't wiring money. I wasn't doing whatever. So I see your point when you say about for every transaction.
And imagine, let's say you're doing millions in transactions.
That will
Imagine
be-
you're doing billions or trillions in transactions.
Yeah, that will be like. I think with this, which to me, I look at it in a positive, under positive light.
I kind of do too.
I like it. I like it. Yeah, because it will be nice. That means there is now an alternative in the works.
Yeah.
It's gonna take time for it to be well established. It's gonna take time by the time other countries will sort of shift to this new alternative or embark on this.
Yeah.
One thing that I am certain of is that the entire global South is going to move forward with this.
Absolutely.
There is no ifs and buts.
The thing is, the entire global South, quite frankly, is, and I think rightfully so, I think the entire global South is really, really tired of stuff like the IMF.
It's too much.
Stuff
it's
like of these like just archaic payment systems.
I just found out 2 countries just accepted an IMF loans.
Oh no.
Pakistan and Morocco.
Yeah, I know that. That's a bummer.
I mean, just think about it. Those 2 countries' economies is not where it needs to be. In the case of Morocco, there is unemployment that is going way up. Now, of course, the corruption that exists and so forth. And in Pakistan is the same, with unemployment that is so high and the value of their currency is so low. And so they end up getting money. You get more money from IMF, you're sinking yourself into more debt. The same thing that is happening to Argentina.
Well, and I will say this to speak to China, when they give loans, they expect there to be a thing that's built. So for example, if they give a loan for an airport, they expect that airport to be built.
That's true.
With the IMF loans, one of the largest, I think, criticisms of them is if you give the country that money, the country can do whatever. The country can do whatever they want with it, right? Which has led to leaders absolutely stripping all of that money out of the country and having the people repay it over decades, right? So I think that a wise thing that is also ethical that China is doing is that when they do give a loan, they expect some infrastructure to be built, and they make sure that it is built. So that is a kind of a crucial difference that I just casually observed.
No, you're absolutely correct, because look at the example in Africa. Some countries where the Chinese have loaned money.
Infrastructure is there.
The infrastructure is there. Like I always say, when our officials go to Africa, that airport they land on or they land at, it's built by the Chinese.
Well, but it actually gets built.
That is true.
The people, because an IMF loan isn't just given like it's supposed to be given, or any kind of loan. I'll say this: any kind of loan is supposed to be given typically for infrastructure, typically to grow a country in some way, right?
Yeah.
But if that infrastructure doesn't get built, if that stuff doesn't end up happening, then the country has to basically pay for nothing.
Yeah.
And that is a huge, huge problem.
Now here is where my concern with all this, and I have a serious concern, and usually I won't say things lightly till I have think them through, because that's usually how I think.
Yeah, for sure.
My concern with this is that the US will have an option to put this progress on hold.
With the Chinese digital yuan being used for cross-border transactions, you think so? How I
initiating a military conflict that's gonna derail, because I'm already seeing what's going on right now with the 2 countries of Philippines, especially what just happened 48 hours for the Philippines now accepting You know what the Philippines is accepting now?
Mm.
Is accepting to defend Taiwan.
Oh no.
Just connect the dots,
Yeah.
guys. This is where I see the objective also, even though the idea of the South China Sea has been in the works, it's
Yeah.
nothing new. Why am I surprised that Donald Trump is moving into this direction? I'm not. But the fact that now it will be accelerated because of what the Chinese is going to be.
For
So
sure.
to do this, to halt this progress per se, even though it's not going to work, but we're still going to try it. We're still going to try.
My concern is that it will backfire horribly. The conflict with Russia has backfired on the US enormously.
Yeah, well, there is,
and especially financially.
There are voices now inside DC, believe it or not.
Yeah.
Those will never come to the forefront, rather. They're saying that that will be a suicide. Engaging with the Chinese military.
That is my biggest concern.
It just, but again, hypothetically, guys, just think of it this way. Should this move forward?
Yeah.
That will be the objective, is to halt what the Chinese progress is.
I absolutely
That's
agree.
the only way I see it, because when I start to see the statements coming out of governments in the region, the likes of Japan, the likes of South Korea, Australia, Philippines, even New Zealand stays behind the shadow per se. Then
is so small.
You start to think, and this,
beautiful.
just to link all this together, once again, think about what the Russian president just stated. And by the way, I will be talking about that tomorrow on the geopolitical trends, because that's more of a geopolitical issue than economics. However, there is this links. And this one, and I'll share it with all of you now. The idea is that Russia issued a warning to the US regarding the targeting of Iran. Just think about all this. All this, the tensions, the military dimensions versus the economic aspirations of these countries, and the only military dimensions that's going to now create this kind of...
No, for sure. The U.S. has put itself in a really precarious spot because the United States really was built on war. And it's a reason that we have been in nonstop wars that we haven't won for longer than I've been alive on this planet.
Started in 1952.
Yes. So much longer than I've been on this planet. And so I do think that the United States is in a very precarious situation because the population of the United States is really war fatigued.
Yeah.
It is because the media has not made it clear that the United States has been built on war, which I think most people would have a real issue with.
Yeah.
But the United States people are so upset about how bad things are here. I think that more conflicts is really not going to fly. Now, granted, Donald Trump's not up for another term. He cannot have another term despite talking about it.
He's pushing for it. He's pushing for it. Here is where my concern, Elizabeth.
Yeah.
Here is with my concern, because I don't trust Congress. I will not be surprised if Congress will vote on amending the Constitution.
No, he
Mark my word on it.
That is it may
we'll become a monarchy here.
Oh no,
we don't have a king.
Absolutely.
Forget about it.
Certainly not King Donald Trump. Like
forget about it.
Whether you like him or not, he is number one. He's not young. It's not when you're not looking at a young man who's going to be king forever, right? Like this is I think
it's ridiculous.
One of the worst things he could possibly be pushing is like a third term. Do not.
Yeah.
I cannot even imagine.
I mean, now they're starting even silencing people that if they criticize him or criticize Israel or criticize, it's ridiculous.
Yeah. The same thing's happening.
I've been watching something recently. It's called, I don't know if you know about it or not. It's called the pyramid power.
Yeah.
Oh man. It is insightful to understand how the media, to understand the degradation of the education system. Do you understand how all this works together for the sake of pushing the agenda one direction or another? So
I think I have.
If you guys get ever a chance,
pyramid of power, guys.
If you ever get a chance to listen to that, it's worth your time.
Yeah.
Mark my word on it. I will not recommend something that will be just to waste your time. It will be worth your time. It's called the pyramid of power.
Yeah.
It gives you exactly spot on. And this is where it becomes the issue, where America is headed, and kind of we all started to. It's becoming clear, and this is nothing just because Trump won the election. No. That's been going on. For me personally,
sure.
I will go as far as early 80s.
Yeah.
Early 80s. That's where you start to see this kind of. We are heading out in a different direction now.
Yeah.
And when you start having now the so-called government, the Trump administration, that are saying, oh, we want to bring our troops back home. We don't want any foreign wars. And yet you are the one pushing for it.
Right.
But the ones for against the Chinese is aimed at that specific thing of preventing this move forwards towards the financial alternative.
And the thing is, what the United States could do is just become more competitive.
We can't.
You don't have to.
We can't.
Here's the thing. I think we can.
I think we can't. I disagree with you on that.
I think we can.
I disagree with you.
The United States, up until now, because China is really catching up, like China's technologically catching up really fast. Okay.
Well, yeah. Actually,
if not even surpassed. Okay?
Actually, yeah, I was gonna say they surpassed us already.
At the very least, are on like a really good, on a really close footing. Okay. The United States, if it really were to pour itself into building up its people, for example, sending more people, focusing more on science and engineering, focusing on educating its people, focusing on making technology cheaper, because that is something that has not necessarily been done. When you're looking at these AI investments or whatever, you're looking at $500 billion, right? Where you have China's DeepSeek for like 5 million. Yeah. So you making it cheaper, actually having these financial tools, like this, for example, having these financial tools, and not in a like ominous central bank digital currency, because most people in the United States do not want a central bank digital currency because they don't trust their government, for good reason. There's really great, amazing reasons why, like, you know, the JFK assassination files, right?
Yeah.
They're released. And it's something like, I don't know, what is it, like 20,000 pages or something, of like 80,000 pages have been released or whatever. Like, people don't trust their government. That's why they want all these things released. Yeah. And MLK, God rest his soul, but like MLK and the hand that our government agencies had in all of that. And then it's just insanity, right? People don't trust the government. So central bank digital currency is not the answer to that. More surveillance and control is not the answer for the United States for that, because Chinese may trust their government, but the Americans don't.
Yeah,
for good reason.
And a good point you brought up, because when I was in China, I kind of had a conversation with them. Of course, people felt uncomfortable chatting about it. Yes. And I can understand, and I respected that, but it gave me an idea. Yeah. And the idea that I got to me was that's how much they trust their government. They don't even bother with the political aspect.
Hold on. But then why were they nervous to talk to you?
They just didn't feel comfortable to talk, because it's not something they do. They kind of almost, I felt like, and I could be wrong, but I felt like this is a matter for the government to deal with the policies. We don't get involved in this because we trust our government to do what's right. That's how I felt about it.
Guys,
I could be wrong.
I don't. Let's ask, guys, if you're from China, or if you are if you're from China, if you're in that environment, how does the population as a whole? Obviously, there are people who are skeptical and there are people who are very trusting. There are opposite ends. Yeah. But for the most part, where do people fall in terms of trusting their government? I don't know. I'm not Chinese. I don't know that. Yeah. I'm curious. So I'm open to what you guys think about that.
Well, just my own observation, because, you know, you kind of know what to look for. Sure, and that's what I get the sense of why they don't get involved, whatever. It's because they're saying this is a matter for the government. Wow. We trust the government to do the right thing. Those people that have been, because here's the thing. Yeah. If you know how it works as far as becoming a part of the political elites and so forth. Yeah. You can't just run for office because of money, whatever. No. Yeah. You have to start from from the ground up. Yeah. Being maybe a mayor of a small city, maybe a member of city council. Maybe you work your way up the ladder. Yeah. Because with that comes that experience. It comes that understanding of what the communities needs. It comes of I had a chance to read about the background of President Xi Jinping.
Yeah.
I mean, it was an eye-opening to understand where he came from for him to be where he's at.
Well, there certainly is a different level of responsibility held on Chinese leadership overall, because even when what is the, oh my gosh, Evergrande.
Yeah.
Even when Evergrande fell, their CEO was financially held responsible for that. Can you imagine that happening in the United States, where something collapses and then
corruption here?
And then the CEO is actually held responsible, the board of directors is actually held responsible? No, that absolutely would not happen here. So there are clearly a different standard held for the leadership in China. That's absolutely true.
Yeah.
However, it is also, like I said, I'm not in China, and I would like, your opinions. If you are a Chinese person in China watching this, I would really love your opinion on this. But there certainly have been, the zero COVID policy was, I think, criticized worldwide for how brutal it was.
Yeah.
So I think there's certainly that aspect also that you cannot ignore. I don't know if there is sort of a lesser degree of just control no matter what.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that. But the zero COVID policy was a rough policy. And even if you look at the one child policy, I mean, that was not that long ago. I mean, that generation is now an adult, but that absolutely, I mean, to dictate how many children a family can have is a fairly high level of control. And I understand at the time why they did it. Now they're dealing with the ramifications of it, which I guess that I don't know that if they thought the ramifications would never come, or they didn't think their way through that completely. I don't know what that situation was then, but they're dealing with the ramifications of it right now. So China has also had a history of very strict control over its populations in certain ways. Now, I will say that has led to, I don't know if it's directly led to it or if it's contributed, but it's a large population and a fairly diverse population. So I do understand that they controlled for that reason, but I don't know enough of what it's like being on the ground there as a citizen, as a person. So you guys are going to have to kind of tell me about that.
So, but the idea for us here, at least, and I know some might be thinking we are just criticizing, but we also, and I speak for myself here, I also think of solutions to how this could be. For example, if you are to think about, and I speak for our system here, because I live here and I am familiar with it. For example, I'll start with the first thing is to sort of reform the tax system. I'll start with that, the basic. That's the first thing. In the US. That would be the basic thing to do. Second thing, I'll think in terms of this Congress. I don't care how great you are. We're going to limit your term into how many terms you can serve. You can't stay in Congress 35 years, 40 years, 20 years. You max, you do your 12 years, and that's about it. I will put a term limit also on the Supreme Court. You can't be in for life because Supreme Court is fragmented. Supreme Court is fractured, legally speaking. Supreme Court is corrupted also. And second, and after this one, you think in terms of how the education system ought to be, because if you think about how the education system was set up, it didn't happen last decade. It didn't happen 3 decades, or you have to go back to 1902. And thanks to whom? You have to thank none other than Rockefeller and what's his name? Andrew Carnegie.
Oh, sure.
They both set up the board of directors to control how education, and the state will have to dictate to you. When I say state, I'm referring to the national government, but also to a degree state. I used to teach. That's why I left I'm not going to even say the name of the university, because it's not worth mentioning.
Oh, yeah.
Sure. But that's why I left. It's a 4-year institution, well known here in the state of Texas. But I said, hell no, I am not going to do what you are asking me to, because what they want me to do is stand there and read the slides. I said, I will not do that, because I can't shortchange my students, because that won't be right.
Well, but that's what I'm saying is the United States needs some innovation.
Well, they
the
don't want
United
that.
States needs
Yeah.
to like get their head in the game.
Yeah.
Like stop trying to tear everybody else down and get your head
Yeah.
in the freaking
Yeah, they don't want
game.
that, because when I started to challenge the students intellectually, they did not like that. And that was the whole reason.
Yeah.
That was the whole reason for why Rockefeller and Andrew Carnegie set the whole motion for how education in America ought to be, because you have to prevent what we called critical thinking. This is why sometimes I kind of get frustrated with some of us in the community, especially on the other channel. I had one idiot saying, "Oh, you address your community like child." I say, pathetic, because you couldn't think.
Yeah.
And all it is because I ask the community questions to trigger their thinking, to have them part of the conversation.
It's called the Socratic method.
I know. And this
So
guy's
you
saying,
ask the question.
I am treating my community like children. How pathetic and ignorant. And it gives me an idea right there. This person has no understanding whatsoever.
Yeah.
And that in itself is reflected into how the education system in America is.
Oh, absolutely.
So the first thing to fix this one is, first of all, get rid of this so-called, what we call it, the tenureship.
Oh.
Get rid of tenureship altogether. Do you know what happened with tenureship?
Like tenureship in a university?
In university, once you become a tenure, you become a tenure, you can do whatever you want.
Yeah.
So now if you become a tenure, what incentive do you have to give 110% to your students? You don't, because you get in paycheck, and who cares whether my students learn or not? I'll say get rid of that. Put in qualified teachers or instructors, professors, whatever term you want to use, that can contribute to critical thinking. This is not about, like I always say to my students, you don't need me here to read to you. You can read yourself, but I am here to challenge, see what you are made of, intellectually speaking.
Yeah.
And that university didn't like it, because my name started to circulate on campus my first semester.
Yeah.
They didn't like it. And I told the president to his face, I said, "Sir, let me just tell you one thing, so we won't start on the wrong foot," because I already made decision.
Yeah.
I said, I used to work for 3-star generals. If I am asked a question, I'll answer straightforward. I don't dance around. Well, Dr. O, we don't mean it that way. I said, yes, you did, sir.
Yeah.
And here is one thing I need you to know, is I will not compromise on my principles or shortchange my students, no matter what the cost is, even if I have to resign. And that's exactly what I intend to do if this persists.
Yeah.
And I think he was thinking that I was just bluffing.
Yeah, they don't know that you don't bluff.
And that's exactly what I did.
You do not bluff. I know that's true.
I still have this image in front of me. I still remember some students were crying when I mentioned it. Those are big football players.
Yeah.
They were crying because students are as smart as you can even imagine. You know why? Because they can differentiate between a bullshitter and really someone who's straightforward.
Mm-hmm.
Students have that capability. We, the professors, never give them credit for, because we think we are highly mighty, have this PhD status, whatever. Oh, the students don't know anything. Wrong. They do. They just have their own way of expressing that. It might not be with this academic level, with these high words per se. They expressed it at their levels.
Mm-hmm.
But we never, some of us, I shall not generalize, never take a step back and say to ourselves, let's listen to what they have to say. And I realized, you know what? This university is not a good fit for me.
Yeah.
And I said, it's been nice meeting you. And shook hands and left. And that was it. So one of the reform for that will be about education. This is different than what Mr. Trump is doing. As Mr. Trump, what Mr. Trump knows. Let's be honest about it. You give criticism when criticism is due. You give credit where credit is due. Simple as that. If Mr. Trump is thinking about peace, world peace, whatever, why are you dragging us into more wars? Simple as that.
Good question.
Yeah, why don't you fix the economy right here at home first? Why don't you fix why the wages have not been risen for a long time in comparison to where inflation is, the cost of living? That's to me will be the basic things to start with. Then we can get into the nitty-gritty of things. But the system, like I always say, is corrupted beyond.
It is. And
sorry, guys. I just had to let it out. Simple as
It's
that.
important. It's important. And the truth
But
is
also
what you're
because I
saying is
also
true.
take some special vitamins,
Oh yeah.
supplements. I have some. Yeah, they keep me like intellectually engaged. Believe it or not, I'll be talking to you about it, guys. I know some of you have been asking me questions about what we're talking about, but also, it's just my deep concern for where my country is headed.
Oh, absolutely.
If I
have the
didn't
same
care, I want to
concern.
say a word. That's usually my rule. If I don't say anything,
Mhm.
that means I don't care, which
Yeah.
usually not my personality. But for stuff like this, because I'm seeing, and I had a chance, thanks to you guys who funded the trip to Asia, to China at that time, I had a chance to see with my own eyes where the country, China, that is, where it is, the progress that is achieved in such a short time. And I'm like shaking my head. Na zdrowie.
Sorry, guys.
Yeah.
It's-
And I am like asking myself, why can't we have something like that?
Right.
I still couldn't fathom when
Mhm.
I got into that speed train.
Yeah.
It
Oh, I
still, it
know,
still
I
haunts
know.
me till today.
I know.
It took me 8 minutes to get to the airport in this very, what we call them, what you call the type of speed train? It's I drew a blank. Does anybody know what I'm talking about?
I don't know. Put it in the chat. Put it in chat. if
I
you
drew
know
a
what it
blank
is.
on it.
But no, it's okay.
It doesn't have
yeah.
the.
I know what you're talking about. I know. What you're
Anyway,
talking about,
it's
though,
those
yeah.
kind of speed trains.
Mhm.
301 kilometers an hour.
Mhm.
8 minutes I was at the airport. I
Yeah.
didn't even feel anything on a road. So, and I'm asking myself, why can't we have something like this? We claim to be the richest nation on earth and we couldn't have speed train. I drove last time to Houston, took me 4 hours.
Yeah.
That's 4 hours going in, 4 hours coming back.
Yeah.
8 hours out of my day.
Yeah.
And to me, if this Mr. Trump wants to really build the country, rebuild it, start with that.
Yeah.
Put an infrastructure that will be serving the people. And talk to the university to cut down on these massive, costly tuitions, $79,000 a year.
Yeah.
I mean, it's endless.
It is.
But again, to me, I know sometimes I criticize more, but I also have some ideas, some solutions that can be implemented if there is an opportunity for it.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, somebody like me in Washington won't be well received.
Mhm.
Trust me, I've been approached to run for Congress. I know how corrupted that institution is, and I said, no, thank you.
Well, I think fundamentally you're right, and so apparently it's Maglev.
Maglev,
it is
thank you
Maglev.
so much. I
There's
drew
a
a
bunch of
blank.
people that said Maglev.
You're absolutely correct.
Yes.
And I am yet to experience, and I give you guys my word, next time, should I make it to China, I am going to take a speed train between Shanghai and Beijing.
Mhm.
It's 4-hour ride, but I wanted to see because this one goes about 460 in 4 hours.
Yeah.
You're there in Beijing.
Well, so your point is and your concern is the same as mine. All of the things that are coming out right now, especially about China, and is that they are getting more technologically advanced faster than we are. And I know that the big race right now is for artificial intelligence, but quite frankly, all of the $500 billion that we're sending towards artificial intelligence, I have real concerns that China isn't going to do it faster and make it open source for everybody, which is exactly what it should have been from the beginning. So my concern is the United States fundamentally just isn't competitive anymore.
No.
And what does that mean for the average American citizen? What does that mean for us? And that's why we changed the channel over to being way more economics based.
Yeah.
Is because fundamentally the US isn't keeping up.
Yeah.
And so us not keeping up is a really big problem for the United States. And I do understand that Trump is doing all this tariff stuff or whatever, but one of the things that I am not seeing is exactly what you're talking about. I'm not seeing the fundamental changes to the way that the United States is run in education, which is a cornerstone.
Yeah.
If you have bad education, you have you have a not even worker-based population. Like you have people who can basically flip burgers, and that's what you have. You don't even have somebody who can run AI machinery. And so I think that's why a universal basic income was talked about for so long, and I don't think it's been dropped really. Is because we're going to end up with a population here in the United States that can't really do anything.
That was the objective of Rockefeller and Andrew Carnegie, to have a nation of workers, not thinkers. That was the objective of it. So because the idea of you're going to have to challenge your intellectual curiosity by any means. You know, that's at least what we're doing in this channel, on both channels.
Sure. Yeah.
That is the, you know, I am not here to sit and just look at the camera and talk. You know,
You're very beautiful though, David.
Well, it's kind of because to me it's the frustration. You know, this is why I care for our community, because I want them to be armed with knowledge that can serve them down the road.
Absolutely.
You know, tomorrow I'll be gone.
Don't you dare be gone.
Well,
tomorrow.
it's part of life. You got the point. That's just how it is. But at least you have contributed something. You have contributed something to a fellow human being, you know, increase the knowledge, help them understand something, whatever. That's to me at least the basics. So, to go back to your point about, you mentioned about artificial intelligence. I want to share this with you. This is the Zhuangzi 3. This is the quantum computing that the Chinese just developed. Quantum, you know how fast that is?
Interesting.
How fast, you won't believe it. And it can do the calculations for thousands and thousands of years.
That's what I'm trying to say, is that it is no longer a U.S. dominated tech sector.
No.
And if the future is technology, which I think everyone thinks it is, unless we bomb ourselves into oblivion, then the future is technological. If we bomb ourselves into oblivion, the future is the Stone Age, right? But go ahead.
No, you go.
But China is winning that race. And what we're talking about here is fintech. It's financial technology.
Yeah.
And it's using blockchain, right? I mean, this is not freaking rocket science. The United States could be doing the same thing. But the United States, you know, Edward Snowden, he basically gave up his life so that people would know that the NSA was spying on them in ways that were not appropriate. Okay. Nothing changed.
Yeah.
Nothing changed as a result of that, but fundamentally, America doesn't trust its government. So we can't have something like a central bank digital currency.
Yeah.
Whereas that might work great for China, that doesn't necessarily work
for
here.
us, yeah.
But there are other options. A central bank digital currency is not the only financial technology that could make payments faster.
Yeah.
And so I have huge concerns about the fact that the US fundamentally is falling behind technologically, even though we have all of these great things. The fact that they are so costly, I think, will fundamentally put us behind, because you can't have the next level of artificial intelligence cost $500 billion versus China's freaking 5 million. You can't have that and stay competitive.
And this one brings the key point. And you know what's the key point?
Yeah.
Is that how much the government works for its own citizens.
Yeah.
That is what I noticed. That was the reason why.
In China, is that what you're saying?
That's what I noticed. And that's why the majority of people, at least the ones that I conversed with on a limited basis, using the translator, of course, I don't speak Chinese. The mistake that I made in my life, you know, that's the mistake I made. Anyway.
You can still learn if you want.
I know, but I might have to move to China to do that.
No, you can do it online.
No, what do you guys think? You know, Elizabeth saying I can learn it here. I say if I want to acquire the language from its sort of the basic, I have to live in the environment.
I mean, sure, but right now you're here, so if you want to start, you can start here.
I know, but it is on a serious note, guys. The idea of that's when I became clear to me that the government. And again, this is not about advocating for Chinese government. No. You know me, I don't do that.
Government would not work here. Fundamentally,
yeah, it won't. The system's different. But what is factual is when you see the results, how a government's working for its own citizens. And the example that I can give you guys is the surplus that China got. Where did they spend it on? Did they spend it on foreign wars? No, they end up spending it on internal infrastructure, internal domestic, internal upgrades of the agricultural aspects, building the dams, building bridges. I went on the bridge between Macau and mainland. Right. Oh my gosh, you see and I was told this just was built recently. I couldn't even take
Right.
pictures because it was so huge and big. But just I was floored to see, because it was so much water,
Yeah.
how they were able to do all this, and the cost of it. They were able to do this.
Yeah.
And you said to yourself, this is how much they're investing in their own country, in their own citizens. Uplifting over 700 million people from poverty is no small task.
Well, and China's not perfect, okay?
No,
Absolutely,
of course not.
absolutely
No
not perfect.
system is.
They're making some mistakes also, okay? So just
Yeah.
to be clear about that. But I think because we are Americans,
Yeah.
I think we see a very concerning trend. And I think you and I are both speaking to the very concerning trend we have here in the United States that is a downward trend.
Yeah.
And it's a downward trend for good reason. Quite frankly, I think it is embarrassing that our school system is this bad. I think it is embarrassing our school system is this expensive. Like
Yeah.
I think it's embarrassing that our healthcare is this expensive. I think it's embarrassing that people have to have this expensive insurance at all. Like that's flat out embarrassing for the richest country in the world. Our infrastructure crumbling. That's embarrassing.
For
So
sure.
like United States, Trump, like get your I also want to say Donald Trump is not in charge of everything.
No, he's
So
not.
it's just like Joe Biden wasn't in charge of anything. The president is not in charge of everything. And that has to be made really clear.
Yeah.
So
I remember when I used to give presentations,
mhm.
when I do presentations, and I remember one time way back, and I mentioned, of course, there were a private audience, it was no recording, it was none of that stuff, because of the nature of the information I was talking about. Sort of not as sensitive, but it's not for everybody per se. And one thing I remember saying at that time, because it brought up the conversation regarding energy and security.
Sure.
And I brought up China, and I said, after I'm done, I said, I'm going to ask you guys, the audience here, not you, but when I was doing the presentation, and I said, do you think China is the future?
Yeah.
And everybody looks at me like I was speaking some foreign language. What do you mean, Dr. O? And I said, you don't see what's coming, do you?
They don't.
And they were like just shocked, the fact that I mentioned that. And I said, well, mark my word on it. Give it about 6, 7, 8 years, and you're going to notice. And here we are.
Well, and I think the U.S. population, I'm very certain that the U.S. population has been kept blind for good reason.
By design.
It's not for good reason, but by design. Yes, absolutely. Oh yes, David speaks.
Yeah, take a look, guys. That's
very good. Very
the website. Take a look at it, and you see I put some things there, very brief. Take a look at it and check it out.
Yeah, but the U.S. population has been kept in the dark. I mean, quite frankly, this payment system, the digital renminbi, and cross-border transactions being done in the digital renminbi, whether it's building, it is building and building and building, and it's encompassed almost every country in the world.
Yeah.
And the fact that this isn't being talked about
gives you an idea right there.
Absolute insanity. Why is this not being talked about? This isn't like some little drop in the bucket thing. This is very serious. You give other countries a way to pay less money and have it be faster. Like, let's say it's true even that it's a 50% price reduction in having a payment in this payment system. It results in a 50% price reduction for the people who are transferring money, and it can happen in seconds instead of 3 to 5 business days.
Sure.
Okay, you give other countries that opportunity, they will figure out how to freaking use that payment system. Yeah,
that's
They'll
true.
figure out how to use it.
For sure.
And so what? I mean, the fact that people aren't talking about this actually makes me really angry. Like, this is the thing people should be talking about. I understand that there's a whole bunch of other issues right now, but this is freaking huge. If the United States loses control of the SWIFT system, guess what the United States doesn't get to use anymore? Sanctions, because it can't.
Yeah, well, it will be irrelevant at that point.
That's what I'm saying, is it's freaking irrelevant.
And that's why this is a fait accompli moving forward with this. That's why the only way to stop this is you start a war. That's the only thing. That's the only way. So, and we are working on, when I say we, I'm referring to Washington, the government doesn't speak on my behalf or act on my behalf, just for the record. So, because I have no faith in the government, yes, I worked there in Washington. I'm not going to deny this because that's part of my experience,
Of course.
part of the knowledge and the
Yeah.
wealth of knowledge that I acquired, whatever. Things were different to a degree.
Yeah.
They were the same mistakes. I argued against certain things. I challenged even some overseas officials when we were overseas, where it's like, man, you can't do that because that just goes against the norm. Well, I said, no, it's not right.
Yeah.
I'm not signing off on this.
Yeah.
So, and until it became clear to me that time to leave, because now it's my decision, not the government. Yeah. I can be there and depend on that so-called paycheck, or I can take stand, move out, and think for myself and be creative. And I have my ways of, because it's not all about just money and dollars, whatever. There is more in life into that. So,
well,
anyway,
but I want to speak to that because there is a whole thing. This is why we changed the channel. Money is fundamentally
that's true to understand.
Important. It shouldn't run your life. Obviously, that's ridiculous. That's being a slave to money. Also, that's
not good.
That's also unhealthy. That's really ridiculous. But those who have the money dictate the power. And so right now, because everybody else, the vast majority of people don't understand how money works, don't understand how the global economy works, and they don't understand how to gather more of it for themselves. So the slice of the power pie has gotten smaller and smaller and smaller till now you have Elon Musk in the Oval Office wearing a t-shirt and a hat. So do you know what I'm saying? So it's been concentrated in the hands of people who do understand it. So we're trying to widen that pie so that more people get pieces of it, so that you have a bigger say, that we have a bigger say in our government. Because I guarantee we would do stuff differently. Don't you think, David?
For sure.
We would absolutely do things differently were we in a governmental position. And so I do believe that it's wildly important that this is a message that gets spread everywhere. Learn about economics, learn about your own economics, and gain more wealth yourself. It is so important to the future of our planet to do that.
All right. On that note, we're going to sign off here. Remember to join me tomorrow. I'm going to do live for you guys tomorrow about Russia and Iran. Yes. But also on Saturday, I will be joined by Professor Anna Malendog. So at 8:30 a.m. So I'll post all this for the community for you this afternoon, guys. So.
Cool.
All right. We look forward to seeing you next time. I hope you all enjoyed our conversation today. Take care.
See you next time. Bye.
Bye-bye.